A Prairie Home Companion is brought to you by Yoplait. With 72% of adults not getting enough calcium, Yoplait is the yogurt with calcium and vitamin D in every cup. Products, recipes, and health information is online at yoplait.com.
It's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, Minnesota, my hometown, out on the edge of the prairie. Perfect weather, absolutely beautiful, perfect weather out there, the sort of weather that makes some of us with dark imaginations feel uneasy, as if something just about to happen on a day so perfect as this. But the blueberries are in, and the gardeners are cutting leaf lettuce and spinach, and the world is fresh and beautiful. Last Sunday was Pentecost Sunday. Pastor Liz gave a sermon about forgiveness. Pentecost Sunday was when Jesus appeared to his disciples, and he breathed the Holy Spirit into them, and he told them to forgive others, and then they would be forgiven. Her prayer was for forgiveness, on which the peace of the world depends. She prayed for the forgiveness of the congressman who took his pants off. She prayed for the forgiveness of his detractors and accusers who may have had more than their share of pride and anger. And as she prayed, she thought of perhaps forgiving the Norgards who had left her with their golden retriever. They asked her to look after this 80-pound golden retriever while they went off to Ann Arbor to get Naomi settled into grad school in nursing, and they didn't tell her until the last minute that the dog is allergic to grass. So this dog does not really belong on this earth. This dog belongs in an apartment up around the 30th floor somewhere. They said, "We're desperate. Can you help us?" And when someone says that to you, you've got 1.5 seconds to think of a lie, and you have to think really fast, and you have to be ready to say, "I want to, but I have to go into the hospital for tests." Well, what are you being tested for? Well, we don't know. That's why the tests. Well, is something wrong? Well, we don't know. That's why the tests. Well, okay. But you have to be able to think of that right away. You have to be able to think, I'm going into the hospital for tests. And she only thought of it after 2.5 seconds. So she's got this enormous dog that she has to give Benadryl to put him to sleep at night. This dog who sneezes through the day, and she has to medicate him with prednisone, which makes him very thirsty. He drinks gallons of water. So he walks around the house, and he's leaking as he walks around. And he's a Lutheran dog, and so he feels guilty about causing all of this trouble, and he's trying to get out of the house. And he got out once this week, and he went out and he ate grass, a suicide attempt, and she had to bring him in, and she gave him a shot of prednisone in the rump, and he wasn't breathing, and she thought about doing mouth to mouth. She thought about it, but a golden retriever has a lot of lip area to cover there, and then he started breathing again. She was just pushing gently on his chest. Well, she's been to all these graduation parties this week. Graduation was Friday night, last night in Lake Wobegon, and looked forward to and dreaded by all sorts of people in town. All the class of 2011 down on the football field. Mr. Halverson, the principal, has been in high alert, code yellow, since May, because it is a long-standing tradition at Lake Wobegon High School that the senior boys, girls, of course, would not be involved in anything as tawdry and low rent as this, but the boys feel an obligation to pull a beautiful trick on the principal at the commencement ceremony. This is a tradition that goes back decades, and so this is sort of your final test for a senior boy. Not all boys do this, but most of them are involved in the conspiracy somehow. Over the years, all sorts of things have happened. He's had rockets go up from the lectern as he spoke. He's had car rockets, of course. He's opened his car, and pig manure has flowed out of it. Yes, it's a serious joke. And once he was reading the names of the graduates, and he felt the front of his pants getting wet, and a small transparent plastic hose was pointed at him, and here was a boy in the front row holding a bulb in his right hand. So he's been on high alert. He's surveillance going on among other teachers. He's had informants, girls mainly, and looking for clues what they're going to do this year. It was a beautiful big night down at the football field, and the band was out there. They played Pomp and Circumstance as the class of 2011 marched in, and little pinpricks of light, cameras, parents weeping, of course, at the sound of this old march. They all marched in, and then we all stood and said the Pledge of Allegiance, and we sang the Star-Spangled Banner. And the choir sang, "Hail to thee, our alma mater, would that we might dwell longer in thine hallowed hallways, but we bid farewell." As Mr. Halverson was watching very closely, all of the class of 2011 sitting out before him in rows of folding chairs out there on the grass. And then the choir sang the battle hymn of the Republic, and a team of boys came in with an enormous Stars and Stripes, carrying it proudly down the football field and then up onto the platform, and the flag was dropped down over Mr. Halverson and members of the school board where they sat there on the dais. There was a lot of flailing around, arms underneath the flag, and he panicked, but they took the flag away and nothing happened. It sort of disconcerted him, though, and so he handed out the diplomas to the graduates out of sequence early in the program. They all marched up, all 85 of them, one after the other, as he read their names correctly, and he handed out the diplomas and watched each of the graduates watch their hands, not the girls, but the boys. Looked at their chests, looked for some kind of plastic flower, something that might squirt water at him, something that might have itching powder on it, something that might blow up. Just watching everybody. They all came across and took their diplomas, and then the chairman of the school board presented Mr. Halverson with the gold pen that he gets every year, the gold fountain pen, and he gave his little speech about trust. Looking at them pleadingly, all of these students out there. Trust. He was watchful, waiting. A pickup truck arrived just as Christine Jacobson was giving her speech about the value of experience in life, the only true education, good or bad. This is how we learn, is through living life. A pickup truck with a cow in the back came slowly around the running track, and he watched it closely, and then it disappeared, and nothing happened. Will Peterson, the class orator, got up, bless you, and got up and gave a speech about honesty, the only true policy, honesty in all things, which scared us. We thought maybe he was going to say something untoward, but then he came to his second principle, which was kindness, no matter what. So, escaped that one. And then the commencement speaker got up, who was some kind of a minister from down in the cities. He'd fallen over on his bike and bumped his head, and he'd been clinically dead for a minute and a half. And so he had written a book about his near-death experience, or actual death experience, when he saw bright lights and he heard voices. And he gave his speech entitled, "Life is More Than What We Can See." Which is true. Life is also what we feel, including numbness and inertia and extreme sleepiness. It was one of those self-erasing speeches that you can't remember a single word when it's done. Not even the or for or at or by. He sat down, and Mr. Halverson reached over and shook his hand and told him that was just one of the best graduation speeches he'd ever heard. And it was at that point that the boy with the little box sitting in the second row of graduates, the little box with the antenna on it, pressed the button, and Mr. Halverson heard a buzzing in his pocket, in his right pants pocket. And then he felt liquid running down his leg. And then there was the smell of skunk. And now he remembered the boys in biology who dissected 2 skunks and how curious it was that there was no smell at all. Well, because the juice had been extracted and now it was running down his leg. The juice from a mature skunk, a skunk with a lot of grudges against the world. A terrorist skunk. He wandered away in a daze. He could hardly breathe. He wandered away, and nobody went after him to stop him. Nobody stopped him when he took his pants off, and he walked bare-legged. Nobody went to his aid. They just wished he would keep going in that direction. But finally, a bunch of football players came in with an enormous yellow plastic tub, and they dumped it over him, ice water and tomato juice. And what a beautiful blessing. Somehow the graduates escaped without odor. The recession was rather quick, and most of the class of 2011 had left already, and others left at a sort of a trot, and some of the awards were left off. But all the parents were waiting for them in the parking lot. There were the usual tears and the usual photographs. And the next day, the whole smell had just blown away, that's all. The air was fresh again, and you hung your sheets out on the clotheslines to get the sweetness of the air. Clothes that had dried out on the lines that smell of summer and grass and flowers. You lie down to sleep on these sheets that are hung to dry outdoors, and you remember all of the most wonderful summers of your youth. You remember what it felt like to walk in grass barefoot. You remember what it felt like to be in a boat fishing. You remember what it felt like on a summer night in Lake Wobegon, when you heard a violin come from across the water, and some kid was playing a movement of a Bach partita.